The Zephyrian scout ship times silent echo times drifted through the asteroid field at the edge of the Sol system, its advanced cloaking technology rendering it completely invisible to any primitive scanning equipment the local species might possess. Commander Vex's tie adjusted the quantum displacement field with practiced ease, ensuring their vessel remained undetectable while they observed the third planet from the yellow star. For 3 standard cycles, the Zephyrians had been studying this world and its dominant species. The humans fascinated them in ways that made the scientific council uneasy. These bipedal creatures had achieved spaceflight despite their relatively short lifespans and tendency toward violent conflict. More concerning was their rapid technological advancement and their curious habit of looking up at the stars with what could only be described as hunger. "Commander," whispered Science Officer Kira Beth, her crystalline voice barely audible even in the ship's perfect silence. "The humans have launched another probe toward our position." Vex Tie's 4 eyes focused on the tactical display. A small metal object was indeed moving through space in their general direction, though it would pass several thousand kilometers away. Nothing to worry about. The humans couldn't possibly detect them through their molecular phase-shifting technology. The Zephyrians had perfected invisibility itself, bending light and energy around their ships so completely that they might as well not exist in this dimension. "Maintain position and continue observations," Vextai commanded. "Mark this as probe number 47 in their exploratory pattern." What the Zephyrians didn't understand was that humanity had never relied solely on seeing to know when they were being watched. Dr. Sarah Chen rubbed her tired eyes and stared at the data streaming across her monitors at the Deep Space Surveillance Center in Colorado. For weeks, something had been bothering her about the readings from the outer system sensors. Nothing concrete, nothing that would show up on official reports, but patterns that didn't quite fit the expected background radiation and gravitational fluctuations. "Still chasing ghosts, Sarah?" asked her colleague, Dr. Marcus Webb, as he brought her a cup of coffee that had probably been brewing since the previous shift. "Look at this," Sarah said, pulling up a 3-dimensional projection of sensor data. "These gravitational microvariations in Sector 7G, they're too regular to be natural, but too subtle to be any known spacecraft signature." Marcus leaned over her shoulder, squinting at the display. "Could be instrumental error, or maybe some kind of previously unknown stellar phenomenon." "That's what I thought at first," Sarah admitted, manipulating the hologram to show different time periods. "But watch what happens when I overlay the patterns with the times our deep space probes reported navigation anomalies." The correlation was undeniable. Every time a probe had experienced slight course corrections or timing delays in that region, the gravitational readings showed the same subtle disturbances. "Something's out there," Sarah whispered. "Something that doesn't want to be seen." Meanwhile, aboard the Time's Silent Echo asterisk, the Zephyrian crew continued their observations, completely unaware that their perfect invisibility was creating its own signature. Their technology worked by manipulating space-time around their vessel, creating a pocket where light and most forms of energy simply curved around them. But this manipulation required enormous amounts of power, and that power created gravitational effects that human sensors, designed to detect the smallest variations in space-time for astronomical research, were beginning to notice. Lieutenant Commander Jake Morrison of the United Space Force had spent 15 years in military intelligence before transitioning to the newly formed Anomaly Investigation Division. His job was to look at things that didn't make sense and figure out if they posed a threat to Earth. When Dr. Chen's report landed on his desk, his instincts told him this was more than just curious science. "Director Williams," he said, entering his superior's office with a thick folder under his arm. "We need to talk about the ghost readings from the outer system." Director Williams looked up from her own stack of reports. "The gravitational anomalies? I thought astronomical was handling that." "They are, but I think we need to consider alternative explanations." Jake opened the folder and spread out star charts, covered in red markings. "These disturbances aren't random. They're following our probe launch schedules. Whatever's causing them seems to be very interested in our space exploration activities." Williams studied the charts carefully. Her background in military strategy made her see patterns that others might miss. "You think we're being watched? I think we're being studied," Jake corrected. "And whoever's doing it thinks they're invisible." The implications hit both of them simultaneously. If an unknown intelligence was observing Earth, it meant humanity was no longer alone in the universe. But more importantly, if they thought they were undetectable, it meant they didn't know humans well enough to understand what they were really capable of. "What's our next move?" Williams asked. Jake smiled grimly. "We let them keep thinking they're invisible, while we figure out exactly what we're dealing with, and then we give them the surprise of their lives." Back on the Times Silent Echo *, Commander Vex Tai was growing increasingly confident in their mission's success. The humans showed no signs of awareness regarding their presence. Their technology seemed limited to chemical rockets and basic electromagnetic communications. The Galactic Council would be pleased with the intelligence they were gathering about this primitive but potentially troublesome species. "Commander," Kira Beth reported from her sensor station, "the humans have just launched what appears to be a routine cargo mission to their orbital stations. Nothing unusual about the trajectory or payload." Vex Tai nodded approvingly. The humans were predictable in their space activities, following established patterns that made observation simple. Soon they would have enough data to recommend appropriate containment protocols to prevent human expansion beyond their local system. What neither Vex Tai nor his crew realized was that the routine cargo mission was actually the first phase of Operation Nightfall, a carefully planned human response to their unwelcome observers. The cargo ship carried no supplies for the orbital stations. Instead, its payload consisted of a revolutionary new sensor array, designed specifically to detect spatial distortions caused by advanced cloaking technology. Dr. Chen had worked around the clock with a team of the brightest minds in theoretical physics to develop a detection method based on quantum field fluctuations rather than traditional electromagnetic signatures. If something was bending space-time to achieve invisibility, her sensors would find the boundaries where normal space resumed. As the cargo ship deployed its hidden sensors throughout the outer system, disguised as routine satellite maintenance, the net began to close around the unsuspecting Zephyrian observers. "Getting some interesting readings on the new array, Dr. Chen reported to the command center. "Looks like our invisible friends are about to discover that humans don't rely on just their eyes to hunt." Aw. The humans had learned long ago that the best way to catch a predator was to make it think it was still the hunter right up until the moment the trap closed. The Zephyrians were about to learn why humanity had clawed its way to the top of Earth's food chain, and why their assumption about human primitiveness was about to become a very dangerous mistake. In the depths of space, invisible watchers continued their surveillance, blissfully unaware that they had just become the watch. The quantum sensors spread throughout the outer system began painting a picture that made Dr. Sarah Chen's heart race, with equal parts excitement and terror. The gravitational distortions weren't random at all. They formed a clear pattern of surveillance positions, each one perfectly positioned to observe human space activities while remaining hidden in the sensor shadows of asteroids and debris fields. "My God," she whispered, staring at the three-dimensional map taking shape on her screen. "There are at least 12 of them out there." Lieutenant Commander Jake Morrison stood behind her. His jaw clenched as he processed the implications. 12 invisible ships meant this wasn't some accidental encounter or scientific expedition. This was organized surveillance on a massive scale. "How long have they been there?" he asked. Sarah ran calculations on the accumulated gravitational data. "Based on the displacement patterns, I'd estimate the first one arrived about 4 months ago. The others have been taking positions gradually, probably trying to establish complete coverage of our launch corridors and communication arrays." Director Williams joined them in the sensor lab, her face grim with the weight of command decisions. "Are we certain these are artificial constructs and not some unknown natural phenomenon?" "Absolutely certain," Sarah replied, highlighting one of the distortions on her display. "Watch this." When our Mars supply mission launched 3 days ago, this signature moved to maintain optimal observation angle. Natural phenomena don't adjust their positions to track human spacecraft. The reality of the situation settled over the room like a heavy blanket. Humanity was being studied by an unknown intelligence with technology so advanced it could achieve perfect invisibility. The Watchers had been observing, cataloging, and probably reporting back to some larger authority about human capabilities and weaknesses. "What's their assessment of us likely to be?" Williams asked the question everyone was thinking. Jake had spent years analyzing enemy capabilities and intentions. From their perspective, we're probably a primitive species that's just learned to leave its planet. Chemical rockets, basic electronics, limited to our own solar system. They likely see us as either a curiosity or a potential threat that needs to be contained before we develop further. Which means, Sarah added quietly, they're probably not here just to watch. They're gathering intelligence for some kind of action. The three humans stood in silence for a moment, contemplating the possibility that first contact with an alien species might not be the peaceful exchange of knowledge that science fiction had promised them. "All right," Williams finally said, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had made difficult decisions before. "We need to know more about their capabilities before they realize we've detected them. What can we learn without alerting them to our awareness?" Sarah turned back to her sensors with renewed focus. "Give me 48 hours. These quantum field detectors can do more than just locate them. If I can refine the sensitivity, I might be able to determine their size, configuration, maybe even their power signatures." Meanwhile, aboard the lead Zephyrian vessel Silent Echo *, Commander Vex Tai was reviewing the latest intelligence reports with growing satisfaction. The human species was progressing exactly as their xenological models had predicted. Their expansion into space was slow and methodical, limited by their inefficient chemical propulsion and their tendency to waste resources on territorial conflicts among their own kind. The humans launched another supply mission to their Red Planet colony, reported Science Officer Kira Beth. Same predictable trajectory, same primitive chemical propulsion. Their largest spacecraft are barely capable of carrying a handful of individuals. Vex Tai manipulated the holographic display showing human space activities over the past several months. Continue monitoring their communication channels. The Galactic Council will want detailed analysis of their social structures and technological limitations. What the Zephyrians had not considered was that their assumptions about human technology were based on observing only the publicly acknowledged space program. The military and intelligence applications of human technology had been deliberately kept hidden from casual observation, and the species that had mastered camouflage and deception on their home planet had simply extended those skills to space. Deep beneath the Colorado mountains, Dr. Chen's sensors were revealing information that would have shocked the Zephyrian observers. The invisible ships weren't just advanced, they were massive. Her quantum field analysis suggested vessels easily 10 times the size of the largest human spacecraft, with power signatures that indicated technology centuries ahead of anything in Earth's arsenal. "They're not just watching," she reported to an emergency session of the Global Defense Council via encrypted quantum communication. "These ships are equipped for serious military action. The power readings suggest they could level entire cities from orbit." General Patricia Hayes, representing the Unified Earth Defense Forces, studied the sensor data with professional interest. "What about their numbers? How many total vessels are we looking at?" 12 confirmed positions. But the sensor grid isn't complete yet. There could be more beyond our current detection range. Sarah highlighted each invisible vessel on the strategic display. "They've positioned themselves to observe all of our major space installations and communication arrays. If they wanted to cripple our space program, they could do it in minutes." Admiral Chen Rodriguez leaned forward in his chair. "Assuming they're hostile, what options do we have?" The question hung in the air like a challenge to human ingenuity. 12 invisible ships with unknown weapons capabilities, crewed by beings with technology that could make them completely undetectable. Any conventional military response would be futile against an enemy that could see everything while remaining completely hidden. "We have one advantage they don't know about," Jake Morrison said quietly. "They think they're invisible, but they're not. We can see them." Traumor.House. "That's not much of an advantage against superior technology and firepower," General Hayes pointed out. "It is if we use it right," Jake replied. "They're operating under the assumption that we're primitive and unaware. That makes them predictable. They'll follow standard observation protocols, maintain safe distances, stick to their surveillance patterns. They won't expect us to take any action because they think we don't know they exist." Sarah felt a chill of understanding. "You're talking about a preemptive strike." I'm talking about survival, Jake corrected. If they're here to study us before taking action, our window of opportunity is closing fast. Once they realize we've detected them, all their advantages become overwhelming. Admiral Rodriguez brought up tactical displays on the conference room screens. What kind of action could we possibly take against targets we can barely detect with our most advanced sensors? The answer came from an unexpected source. Dr. Michael Park from the Fusion Research Division had been quietly reviewing the sensor data while the military officials discussed strategy. Actually, he said, I think I know exactly how to hurt something that bends space-time for protection. All eyes turned to the physicist as he manipulated the holographic displays to show the quantum field distortions around the invisible ships. Their cloaking technology works by creating a bubble of curved space-time around their vessels. But maintaining that bubble requires enormous energy input, and the field has to have boundaries where normal space resumes. Get to the point, Doctor, General Hayes said impatiently. Those boundaries are weak points. Doctor, Park explained, if we could destabilize the quantum field at just the right frequency, their own cloaking technology would collapse. The energy they're using to stay invisible would become a weapon turned against them. Sarah stared at the field patterns with growing excitement. A quantum resonance torpedo. We could design a warhead that doesn't explode in the traditional sense, but creates a cascading field collapse. How long would it take to build something like that? Williams asked. With unlimited resources and authority? Dr. Park calculated quickly. 72 hours for a prototype. Maybe a week for multiple units. Admiral Rodriguez was already reaching for his communication device. You'll have everything you need. But remember, if we're going to do this, it has to work perfectly the first time. We won't get a second chance. As the emergency session dispersed, and scientists and military personnel rushed to begin the most important project in human history, none of them noticed the quantum fluctuation that briefly spiked on Dr. Chen's monitors. One of the invisible watchers had just moved closer to Earth, its advanced sensors trying to understand why human communication traffic had suddenly increased across all military and scientific channels. The clock was ticking, and humanity's hunters were starting to wonder if their prey might not be as helpless as they had assumed. The next 72 hours marked the greatest mobilization of human scientific and military resources in the species' history. Deep beneath the Swiss Alps, CERN's particle accelerators worked around the clock to produce the exotic matter needed for quantum resonance warheads. In underground facilities across 3 continents, the brightest minds in physics raced to solve theoretical problems that had never been more than academic exercises. Dr. Sarah Chen hadn't slept in 36 hours, sustained by coffee and the desperate knowledge that Earth's survival might depend on her calculations. Her quantum sensors continued tracking the invisible fleet, and what she was seeing made her increasingly nervous. Jake, you need to see this, she called across the cramped command center they'd established in a hardened military bunker. Lieutenant Commander Morrison joined her at the sensor station, noting the exhaustion in her eyes. What's wrong? They're changing positions. Sarah highlighted the gravitational distortions on her display. For 4 months, they maintained static observation posts. But in the last 6 hours, 3 of them have moved significantly closer to Earth. The implications were immediate and terrifying. They suspect something. More than suspect, Sarah said grimly. Look at this pattern. They're positioning themselves for optimal firing solutions on our major population centers. New York, Tokyo, London. If they open fire from those positions. Jake studied the tactical situation with growing alarm. The invisible ships had moved into perfect positions to devastate human civilization, while remaining safely beyond the range of any conventional weapons humanity might attempt to use in retaliation. How much longer do our scientists need? Sarah checked the latest reports from the weapons development teams. Dr. Park says the first prototype will be ready for testing in 18 hours. Full production units won't be available for another 3 days. We don't have 3 days. Jake was already reaching for the secure communication link to Global Defense Command. If they're moving into attack positions, it means they've made their decision about humanity. Admiral Rodriguez's voice crackled through the encrypted channel. What's the tactical situation? They're preparing to attack, Jake reported. We need those weapons now, even if they're not fully tested. Dr. Park's teams are working with theoretical models. We have no idea if the quantum resonance effect will actually work against their technology. Sarah looked up from her sensors with grim determination. Admiral, I'm reading massive power buildups in their engine systems. Whatever they're planning to do, they're going to do it soon. Above Earth's atmosphere, aboard the Zephyrian flagship Times, Silent Echo *, Commander Vextai was reviewing the final intelligence reports before implementing the Galactic Council's containment protocols. The humans had shown alarming signs of technological advancement in recent observations, and their communication patterns suggested a level of coordination that made them potentially dangerous if allowed to continue their expansion. All vessels report ready to execute sterilization protocols, announced Tactical Officer Zethran from his crystalline control interface. Primary population centers have been targeted for complete elimination. Vextai felt a moment of regret for what was about to happen. The humans showed potential, and their rapid development suggested they might have eventually become valuable members of the galactic community. But their aggressive nature and unpredictable technology made them too dangerous to permit continued existence. Begin the operation, he commanded. Maintain cloaking fields until all targets are eliminated. The Council wants no evidence of intervention. What Vextai didn't know was that human military satellites had been tracking the power buildups in his fleet for the past hour. Dr. Chen's quantum sensors had detected the massive energy signatures as the invisible ships prepared their weapons, and emergency protocols were already in motion. In facilities around the globe, hastily constructed quantum resonance torpedoes were being loaded onto interceptor missiles that had never been designed for the payload they now carried. The weapons were untested, built from theoretical models and desperate hope, but they represented humanity's only chance for survival. All units report ready for launch, came the report from Launch Control Central. Target coordinates locked in based on Dr. Chen's sensor data. Admiral Rodriguez stood in the Global Defense Command Center, surrounded by screens showing the positions of invisible enemies preparing to destroy his species. The moment he'd dreaded since childhood nightmares about alien invasion was finally here. But humanity wouldn't go quietly into extinction. This is Admiral Rodriguez to all units. Weapons free. Engage the invisible fleet. Across Earth's surface, missile silos opened, and interceptor rockets roared into space carrying humanity's desperate gamble. The quantum resonance warheads were small, barely larger than conventional explosive devices, but they carried technology that could theoretically turn the aliens' greatest advantage into their fatal weakness. Aboard Times, Silent Echo *, Science Officer Kira Beth suddenly looked up from her sensor station in confusion. Commander, I'm detecting multiple missile launches from the planet's surface. The trajectories appear to be. She paused, checking her readings 3 times before speaking the impossible words. Sir, the missiles are heading directly for our positions. The bridge fell silent, except for the soft harmonics of Zephyrian technology. Every crew member stared at their instruments in disbelief. The humans couldn't possibly know their locations. Perfect invisibility was impossible to defeat. Evasive maneuvers, Vextai commanded, his voice tight with the first fear he'd felt in decades. All vessels, abort the attack and retreat to safe distance. But the Zephyrian ships had been designed for stealth, not speed. Their massive hulls and power-intensive cloaking systems made rapid maneuvering difficult. As they began their slow withdrawal from Earth orbit, the human missiles were already closing the distance. Dr. Chen watched her sensors with the intensity of someone whose entire species depended on the next few minutes. First missile approaching target zone in 30 seconds. If this doesn't work, it has to work, Jake said firmly. Humanity doesn't have a backup plan. The first quantum resonance warhead reached the space where Dr. Chen's sensors indicated an invisible Zephyrian vessel. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then the warhead's exotic matter payload activated, creating a cascading quantum field disruption that raced outward at the speed of light. The effect on the Zephyrian cloaking technology was immediate and catastrophic. The carefully maintained space-time bubble around Time's Silent Echo Times collapsed in a chain reaction that sent massive energy discharges through the ship's hull. Suddenly visible for the first time in months, the massive alien vessel appeared like a metallic mountain materializing in space. "Direct hit!" Sarah shouted, watching as her sensors registered the complete failure of the cloaking field. The resonance cascade is working. One by one, across the orbital space around Earth, invisible ships began appearing as quantum resonance warheads found their targets. Some managed partial evasion, suffering only partial cloak failures that left them flickering between visibility and invisibility. Others took direct hits that not only revealed them but sent critical system failures cascading through their advanced technology. Commander Vextai stared at his command displays in shock as Time's silent echo times shuddered under multiple system failures. The humans hadn't just detected them. They had developed weapons specifically designed to defeat Zephyrian technology. The implications were staggering. "How is this possible?" Kirabeth whispered from her damaged sensor station. "They're supposed to be primitive. Chemical rockets and basic electronics." Vextai was beginning to understand that the Galactic Council had made a fundamental error in their assessment of human capabilities. The species that had conquered their home planet through intelligence, adaptability, and ruthless determination hadn't changed when they reached for the stars. They had simply applied those same qualities to a larger battlefield. "Send emergency transmission to the Council," he ordered. "Tell them we've encountered a species unlike anything in our xenological databases. The humans aren't primitive. They're highly advanced predators who were hiding their true capabilities." As more Zephyrian vessels appeared on human sensors, their cloaking systems destroyed by weapons that turned their own technology against them, the balance of power in Earth's local space shifted dramatically. The invisible watchers had become visible prey, and humanity was about to teach the galaxy a lesson about underestimating a species that had fought its way to the top of every food chain it had ever encountered. "Head,"